Hello. I'm just checking. Okay. Hello everyone. I don't see myself, so hopefully hoping that you can see me. Okay, good. I've been told that you can see me. And that everything is good. So we're just going to go with it. So welcome again to our monthly Let's Talk About Race Friday feature. And normally, I have my sidekick with me. I have Keira, but unfortunately, she's not able to join us today. So I'm flying solo. So we'll see how this goes. I'm pretty sure I'm a glass half empty kind of person. So hopefully it's going to go smoothly. If it doesn't, just blame it on a Friday. Okay, so I'm just going to jump in and just want to do a really quick recap. And I'm not going to go over everything, but we've talked a lot about what is like all the kind of things that fall under the race umbrella. So things like microaggressions and stereotypes, and what it means around to have equity, inclusion, diversity, and all those kind of things we've talked about a lot, and how they can show up within your organization, how they can show up within your team, and with the families that you work with. And that's been all good. But today I really wanted to, and it's one of the things that Keira and I was really keen on when we started this series, is to leave you with some strategies. I know in the last sessions, we kind of leave the strategies at the end. And today I really wanted to hone in on a few of them so that you can have some really good takeaways about how can I actually start doing some of this stuff in real time with my team and also with myself. So today I kind of want to look at the business case for inclusion and diversity, the moral case, and then spend a couple of times on looking at some strategies. So we talk about all this, and I know, since the whole thing happened in the U.S. with George Floyd, it's kind of like up the ante, and, with the Black Lives Matter movement, et cetera, and that's all good. But I always say, so what? So what is the so what with all the things that we're trying to do? And there is a really strong business case for you with your organization and with your team to actually have really good, effective, and meaningful inclusion and diversity and belonging services or ethos within your organization and with your team. There are lots of things, lots of evidence out there, but I just wanted to share one with you. It was with McKinsey's accounting firm, and back in 2020, they did a diversity, just a business case about why is it so important to have inclusion and diversity throughout your team. And they found that companies who were diverse and who really put an emphasis on diversity and inclusion, they outperformed their peers 1 in 4. So that was a 1 in 4 chance that they were going to outperform their peers, their fellow organizations who didn't really have diversity as the heart of the organization. And that's really huge when you're talking about attracting the right kind of people, bringing in different voices, bringing in different ideas. That's a significant business case for you to have. Another thing they sort of found was, okay, we know that there's a really good business case for that, but what does that really mean? And how can we actually begin to do that? And they came up with through their study, and I can send the link later on so you can get more detail about that McKinsey study. But one of the things they said that really struck me was, we talk a lot about systematic racism, and, historically, particularly in the U.S., how these things have sort of anchored themselves within our education, our healthcare, our family lives, our, all these kind of things. It's kind of permeating throughout our structure as a country. But the McKinsey study talked about, you in order to break down some of those systems, you have to actually create an inclusive system. And so I was thinking, how do you create an inclusive system? I mean, and systems have always been kind of looked at in a negative way. But if you're looking at it from a positive way, how can we flip this stuff on its head? And how can we really, really, really begin to make some of those bold steps and changes that we're talking about? And so I wanted to encourage you to consider 5 things. And these are 5 things that's come out of the McKinsey study, but 5 things that you could begin to sort of think about doing within your own organization, within your own team. And we've mentioned this before, but one of it is about increasing representation. Representation matters. I remember as a young Black little girl in the Deep South, I was born in Alabama, no one on the television looked like me. And I remember vividly the Mandrell sisters. I'm dating myself now, but it was one of them that was named Louise Mandrell, and she was talking about white rain mousse. It was a commercial that she did, and how it was going to make your hair so beautiful and bouncy and blah blah blah. So I went out with my little allowance money and I got my white rain mousse, sprayed it in my hair. It was not designed for my hair. I mean, I had like sort of crickly. My hair just turned into straw, basically. And I remember my mother saying, "What did you do?" And I said, "Oh, well, Louise Mandrell said that my hair was going to be, bouncy and whatever." And she said, "That's not for your hair." But that's a really silly story, but it really talks about representation. There was no one that looked like me on television. And then carry my hair products. So I just kind of looked at what was there and took it, but it wasn't for me. So it's the same way when you're looking at your teams and your organizations. Who's on there? Who's running the table? Who's a part of the discussions? And equally, who are you partnering with? Are they diverse? Do they have representation of people of, we're talking particularly around race, but do they have representation of people from other underrepresented groups? And within the people that you serve, are you only serving a certain type of people? And so that's the first way that this McKinsey report talked about how you can begin to put positive systems in place. And so looking at really increasing your representation internally and also externally. The other thing they talked about was really strengthening the accountability within your leadership. To make sure that you deliver the IND goals. So whatever goals you have as a team, and I want to stress this, that we don't, Keira and I talked about this a lot. We don't want you to kind of get into this tick box mentality to where you've kind of checked off, yes, I've done that. If there's just one thing that you as a team, you decided you're going to do, whatever that one thing is, or that, 2 things are, whatever they are, that they are real and meaningful for your organization, but also that there's accountability within it. Who's leading on it? How are they leading on it? How are you going to check it? What are their metrics, or what are the things that, how will you know, basically? How will you know that you've made a difference? And that how will you know will be very unique to your organization. There are going to be certain things that you want to have as markers that determine whether or not, we are, when people engage with us, this is kind of how they're feeling. So whatever those things are, just making sure that they are done. There's accountability to attach to that. And the other thing they talk about is making sure that there's fairness and there's transparency. And we've mentioned this before when we've talked that things have to be transparent, which means a lot of the cliches, whatever the word is, where you have the little groups, that has to cease. And when decisions are being made, that people are involved in the decisions, or at least they are aware that decisions are being done. I mean, everybody doesn't have to be. I say that because depending on what you're doing, there's certain things maybe the executive board needs to decide on versus every single person within your organization. But whatever that is, making sure that there's transparency within those decisions. That's really, really key. And the fourth thing that McKinsey talks about is promoting this openness, and it kind of ties into the accountability, but it sort of sets the tone for making sure you have a zero tolerance. So for any kind of inappropriate behavior. So you are promoting this culture of, this is how we do things around here, and it doesn't really matter whether it's the founder, whether it's a member, whether it's a partner, whether it's a family that you're serving. The way that you are showing up as an organization, that openness and that accountability and that transparency, it permeates throughout all of those relationships. And that's very, very important. Because the last thing you want to do is say that this is the way that we are, something happens, and then those things don't align, the way you respond to something, or maybe you just ignore it. Maybe someone comes up to you and say, hey, a family comes to you and say, this is what happened. Your team member, made me feel this way or did this certain thing, and you sort of ignore it. So that's where that openness comes in, and it has to be across all stakeholders. And the last thing that McKinsey talks about is making sure that we foster this idea of belonging. And we've talked about this before. What is belonging? And this is a little bit a tougher one, but it's important to begin to discuss it and what it means for your organization, because belonging is very subjective. It's very much about how that person feels. And so one of the things, I always encourage organizations to think about is when someone interfaces with you for the first time, what do you want them to see, to hear, to feel? And really start defining that for you as an organization. How do we want people to, leave us? How do we want them to feel when they come in contact with us and when they leave us? And many of you will know I'm a sort of a quote addict, and one of my favorite ones is by my Angelou, and she says, people will forget what you say, they will forget what you do, but they will never forget the way you make them feel. And so I think that's really, really important. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is the moral case for having really good, effective inclusion and diversity. And basically, the moral case is simply the right thing to do. That's it. Treating people with respect, treating people equitably, making sure that people have the same, this is fair, the resources are fair. It's just the right thing to do. There's nothing else that I can say with that. And in the last couple of minutes we have about 5 minutes actually, but I said couple. I wanted to really talk about two strategies. One, to begin to help you begin to implement these inclusion and diversity concepts and, sort of ways of thinking within the fabric, weaving in within the fabric and within the culture of your organization. And one of them is a this is me sort of idea. And this is me exercise or campaign or whatever you want to call it. It's a very simple concept, but it's really about your team getting together and sharing their stories, sharing their own authentic stories. The point of this is by sharing who you are and sharing, your team members, then your team, and sort of bringing your whole self. It really helps to begin to break down some of the perceptions, stereotypes, and ideas that we have. And it also allows us to see that we all fit. No one fits in one box, that we all have different parts of ourselves that are simultaneously working together. And quite a few organizations have done this in the corporate world, and some of it was around mental health and mental well-being, but you can do it for race as well, is having scheduled time within your team, maybe with your team meetings, where you allow people to share their stories. And I'll send a little link on about the This Is Me exercise and how you can modify it to make more sense for your organization. But that's one sort of simple strategy, but an incredibly powerful strategy. Because the other thing it does is it increases people's confidence and their how do I want to put it? They feel like they can bring themselves, to work, if you like, or bring themselves within your organization, that they can bring their full selves. So that's really important. The other strategy that is a concept, but you can make it into a strategy, and I mentioned it a second ago, was about the zero tolerance. And that's going to take a little bit longer time for you as an organization to do, because you have to really identify, what do we mean by zero tolerance? Do we mean like nothing, or do we allow something happen, and then we, a comment maybe is made, and maybe people make a comment because they just don't know, for example, or a name is mispronounced, not with any evil intent, but it's just that they didn't know. So you have to decide what level you have with that. I mean, I've worked with some organizations where they are like absolutely nothing, and in some ways that almost ties you in knots, because you don't allow, sometimes, not in every situation, you don't allow opportunity to learn to occur, because you've kind of like cut people down. But the zero tolerance, I think the couple of concepts that I wanted to bring out with this is that it is about you beginning to, when I look at, I say, when you look at your policies, for example, under zero tolerance, not necessarily looking at your policies and procedures just as policies and procedures, but one really simple way to look at it is, are they people policies? Are the people at the center of your practices, of your policies or your procedures? If people aren't, then maybe you need to kind of rethink it. And the other thing I talked about earlier about representation, which is very important within your policies. And also the last thing under this zero tolerance is making sure that they connect with your values. So what are your values? What are the things that make you tick? What are the things that are, it's really like the heart, I guess, of your organization and then your team? Again, are those things tied into this culture of diversity and inclusion that you're trying to achieve? So to recap, because I'm mindful of our time, to recap, there's a business case for having inclusion and diversity within your team and your organization. You're going to do better. You're going to do better financially. You're going to do better from a recruitment standpoint. You're going to do better with how you perform in any area. 1 in 4 chance you're going to do better. And the moral case is just the right thing to do. And then the couple of strategies we talked about was the This Is Me exercise, which is just the way that you set up an intentional kind of structured time where you allow your team members to talk about themselves. And it's a way of beginning to break down some of those stereotypes that we have around one another. About each other, sorry. And then the second strategy is to develop a zero tolerance rule culture, but being able to identify that in a way that makes sense for your organization. And one key point under that is making sure any policies and procedures you have are actually people policies, and people are at the center and the heart of what you do. So with that, I will say adieu. And if there are any queries that people have, please jot them down. I'm not able to see the queries, but I think Courtney, who's managing it, will see them. But if you have any questions about some of the things that I've just shared, please feel free to just to jot them down. Oh, I see someone says there's a great quote. Yes. If you want any of my quotes, just let me know. I have a load of them. So thank you so much, everyone. And we will be back next month. Same. Okay, thank you. No questions, just comments. Thank you. We'll be back same time next month. And hopefully I will have Keira with me again. And I really appreciate you taking time out to spend these few minutes with us today. Take care. Bye-bye.